A shimmer caught my eye as I entered the bathroom, the early morning sunlight reflecting off something on the carpet. It wasn't blinding but enough to grab my attention. I looked down to make sure I wouldn't step on anything sharp, being barefoot. Amanda hadn't mentioned dropping anything, so I was puzzled. Without the light, the object was nearly invisible, blending perfectly with the carpet. I squatted down, searching more closely until I found it. A tiny circle of foil, reflecting light directly into my eyes. I picked it up, instantly recognizing it as the backing of a pill strip, the small circle of foil that sometimes falls out when you pop a pill from its packaging. Typically, it remains attached to the strip, but occasionally, like now, it detaches and falls. I inspected it closely. One side was blank, but the other had some markings. It was Wednesday, so I figured it came from Tuesday's pill. I wasn't on any medication. I was 36 and in excellent health, as was Amanda. We had both had our annual checkups recently and were declared fit and healthy. So, why was there a pill backing in our bathroom? Several pills require daily intake, but one in particular came to mind, the birth control pill. Amanda hadn't been on birth control, or so I thought, especially since I had a vasectomy 3 years ago after our second and final child was born. She had no issues with cramps or period pain and had always had trouble-free cycles. So, why the pills? My initial thought was she might have some illness she hadn't disclosed to me. My mind spiraled into dark places for a few moments, but then I remembered our recent physicals and how we had shown each other our reports. We were both fine. If the little foil circle was here, the pills must be here too. I closed and locked the bathroom door, with Amanda still in bed, and started searching. It took a while, but eventually, I found them. They were hidden at the bottom of a box of tampons inside a box of aspirin. I recognized them instantly as the birth control pills she used before my surgery and even between our children when we weren't trying to conceive. Why did she start taking the pills again? There was only one logical answer. She had been with someone else. Amanda and I had been together for 10 years. I had just graduated from university and was on my way to becoming an architect, while she worked as an administrative assistant. We met at a cafe, and though we didn't click immediately, there was enough mutual interest for her to accept my invitation to dinner. Amanda was tall, just a few inches shorter than my 5 feet 11 inches, and a former athlete, maintaining an athletic build with a lean figure. Her best feature, in my opinion, was her buttocks, simply stunning. We dated for about a year before getting married when I was 27. Our 2 children, Max, 5, and Lily, 3, were our perfect pair, and I had surgery to prevent any more surprises. Our family seemed perfect, or so I thought. Amanda returned to work after maternity leave for each child, unwilling to leave the job she loved. We had a nanny who looked after the kids during the day and left in the evening. She cost nearly as much as Amanda earned, but Amanda didn't care. She just wanted to work. I co-founded an architecture firm with a few friends, and while we weren't rich, we did well for ourselves. I cleaned up the bathroom, put the pills back, and realized I needed to think. Confronting her immediately wasn't wise. I needed a plan, and more importantly, I needed proof. As I left the bathroom, my mind raced with possibilities. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of Amanda's steady breathing from the bedroom. I stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to gather my thoughts. A wave of nausea hit me, and I took a deep breath, attempting to calm the turmoil inside. The implications of what I had found were overwhelming. Had she been seeing someone for a long time? Was it a recent fling? My heart pounded in my chest as I considered the next steps. I decided to go about the morning as usual, not wanting to arouse any suspicion. I made breakfast, played with the kids, and pretended everything was normal. Amanda eventually joined us, looking radiant and carefree. She kissed me on the cheek, and I forced a smile, my mind still reeling from the discovery. We chatted about our plans for the day, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness and anger. After breakfast, I left for work, my thoughts consumed by the tiny piece of foil. At the office, I found it hard to focus. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concerns, blaming it on a rough night's sleep. I retreated to my office, closed the door, and began researching. I needed to know if my suspicions were valid. I looked up information on birth control pills, trying to understand if there could be any other explanation. But nothing added up. Amanda had no medical condition that required such medication. The only logical conclusion was infidelity. My heart sank. Amanda and I had built a life together, a family. We had dreams and plans for the future. How could she betray me like this? I stared blankly at my computer screen, the weight of my suspicions pressing down on me. I decided I needed concrete evidence before making any accusations. I ordered a DNA testing kit online, planning to test the children when Amanda wasn't around. I also looked into surveillance equipment, cameras, voice recorders, and phone cloning tools. If Amanda was hiding something, I would find out. The day dragged on, and I struggled to keep up the facade of normalcy. When I returned home that evening, Amanda was her usual cheerful self. We had dinner, played with the kids, and put them to bed together. I couldn't help but watch her closely, looking for any signs of deceit. But she seemed genuine, her smiles and laughter reaching her eyes. As the night wore on, I lay in bed next to Amanda, my mind racing with plans. I needed to be careful, methodical. I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I had to find out the truth. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and meticulous planning. I installed the surveillance equipment while Amanda was out, set up the DNA tests, and cloned her phone. Every moment was filled with dread and determination. I was on a mission to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. By the end of the week, I was ready. The DNA tests were in the mail, and the surveillance equipment was in place. Now, all I could do was wait and observe. The tension was unbearable, but I steeled myself for what was to come. I needed to know the truth, and nothing would stop me from finding it. The drive to work was a haze of conflicting thoughts and emotions. My mind kept circling back to that tiny circle of foil and the implications it held. As soon as I parked my car, I knew I couldn't just sit at my desk and pretend everything was normal. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I spent the morning researching how to gather evidence without Amanda catching on. My focus shifted from the daily tasks of running my architecture firm to the urgent need to uncover the truth about my wife's activities. I started with the DNA testing kits. Testing Max and Lily would be easy. I often put them to bed before Amanda got home, so I could swab their cheeks without raising any suspicion. Next, I looked into surveillance equipment. I ordered several small cameras, voice recorders, and a phone cloning tool. The cameras would cover the key areas of the house, and the voice recorders would go in her car and bag. The cloning tool would allow me to access her phone's data, including messages and call logs. I had to be careful. If Amanda was as discreet as I feared, she might have taken measures to cover her tracks. By mid-afternoon, I had everything ordered and scheduled for delivery to my office. The next step was to plan how to install everything without Amanda noticing. That evening, I arrived home with a renewed sense of purpose. Amanda greeted me with her usual warmth, and I forced myself to act normal. We had dinner, played with the kids, and put them to bed together. Once Amanda went to shower, I used the opportunity to retrieve the hidden cameras and voice recorders from my car. I started with the living room, hiding a camera on a high shelf, concealed by a stack of books. Next, I moved to the bathroom, placing another camera behind a decorative item on the counter. Finally, I installed a camera in our bedroom, strategically hidden among some knickknacks on the dresser. As I worked, my heart pounded with the fear of being caught. I finished just as Amanda stepped out of the shower, wrapping herself in a towel. She gave me a curious look, but I smiled and told her I was just tidying up. The weekend passed in a tense blur. I watched Amanda closely, looking for any signs of unusual behavior. She was affectionate and attentive, our interactions filled with the familiar comfort of a decade-long marriage. But now, every touch, every smile felt tainted with suspicion. I checked the pill strip whenever I had the chance. The pills corresponding to each day disappeared, confirming that she was taking them. On Monday, I told Amanda I'd be working from home. After she left for the office, I retrieved the flash drives from the cameras and plugged them into my laptop. My heart raced as I watched the footage. The bathroom camera confirmed that Amanda was indeed taking the pills. But the real shock came from the bedroom camera. On Saturday night, while I was preparing dinner, she had taken a shower and then sent a text message from a phone that wasn't the one I cloned. She must have a second phone. I watched as she carefully hid the phone inside the air duct in our bedroom. My mind reeled. Why did she need a second phone? Who was she texting? The implications were clear and devastating. This was the first concrete evidence that Amanda was hiding something significant. The next morning, I waited until she retrieved the phone and left the house before checking the vent. As expected, the phone wasn't there. She must take it with her when she leaves. That evening, I watched her closely as she returned home. She dropped her bag in the hallway and followed her usual evening routine. After dinner, she went to shower, giving me another chance to check her bag. The phone wasn't there. Quietly, I went to Lily's room and accessed the vent from her side. There it was. I quickly cloned the phone onto my new device and returned it just before Amanda came out of the bathroom. The next day at work, I examined the cloned phone. My world shattered as I read the messages. Amanda and her lover exchanged intimate details and plans for secret meetings. They talked about things only a close, long-term lover would know. My name never appeared. It was as if I didn't exist. Michelle found me in my office, staring blankly at the screen, tears streaming down my face. She closed the door and sat across from me, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Tell me," she said softly. I showed her the phone. She read through the messages, her face hardening with each passing moment. "You need more information," she said. "You need to know for sure if the children are yours. And you need to gather as much evidence as possible before you confront her." Her words were a lifeline. I nodded, grateful for her clear-headedness. The DNA results would arrive on Wednesday. Until then, I needed to stay calm and focused. Michelle suggested a trip to Portland to give me some time and space. She texted Amanda that I had an urgent business trip. Amanda's response was brief and nonchalant, confirming my suspicions further. Michelle booked my ticket and arranged everything. I followed her instructions without question, grateful for her support. On Wednesday morning, the DNA results arrived. I sat in my office, the envelope in my hand, my heart pounding. Michelle stood by my side, her presence a steadying force. I opened the envelope and scanned the results. Neither Max nor Lily was mine. The betrayal was complete. A wave of rage and sorrow crashed over me. Michelle placed a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "We need to take action," she said. "We need to confront her, but we need to do it right." I nodded, my mind clearing. The path ahead was painful, but necessary. I gathered the evidence, every incriminating detail, and prepared for the confrontation. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. That evening, I went home, a storm of emotions raging inside me. Amanda greeted me with her usual warmth, but now, her touch felt like a betrayal. We had dinner, played with the kids, and put them to bed. Every moment felt surreal, like living in a nightmare. After Amanda went to bed, I retrieved the camera footage and the clone phone, adding to the growing pile of evidence. The next morning, I told Amanda I needed to work from home again. She left for work, oblivious to the storm brewing. I called the nanny, instructing her to keep the children at home. Amanda left for the office, and I sat in my home office, waiting. At exactly 10 a.m., Amanda was served with divorce papers at her office. She called me immediately, but I ignored her call. My phone buzzed incessantly as she tried to reach me. When she arrived home, she stormed into my office, her face pale and angry. "Gary, what is going on?" I met her gaze, my expression cold. "I know everything, Amanda. The affair, the lies, the children. I know it all." Her eyes widened in shock. "Gary, please, let me explain." "I don't want to hear your excuses," I interrupted. "You've been lying to me for years. You convinced me to get a vasectomy while you were still seeing someone else. The children aren't mine, Amanda. It's over." Tears welled up in her eyes. "What about Max and Lily?" "They're not my children," I said, my voice hardening. "Take them to their real father." She broke down, sobbing. I felt a pang of sorrow, but it was overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of betrayal. "Get your things and go," I said, my voice cold and final. She packed her belongings, her sobs echoing through the house. The children, sensing the tension, clung to her, confused and scared. I watched as she loaded them into the car and drove away, my heart heavy but resolute. The life I knew was over, but I was determined to rebuild, free from lies and deceit. After Amanda left with the children, the house felt eerily quiet. The reality of my situation hit me hard, but I couldn't afford to collapse. I needed to stay focused. The evidence I had gathered so far confirmed my worst fears, but I needed more. There were still many unanswered questions, and I needed to get to the bottom of everything. First, I reviewed the footage from the cameras I had installed. The living room camera showed nothing unusual, just Amanda going about her daily routine. The bathroom camera confirmed she was taking the pills, but it was the bedroom camera that revealed the most damning evidence. Amanda was meticulous about hiding her second phone, using it only when she thought I wasn't around. The footage showed her texting late at night, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. The clone phone provided more details. The messages between Amanda and her lover, Mark, were explicit and detailed. They talked about their secret meetings and intimate moments, and even discussed plans for the future. The messages were heartbreaking to read, each one a knife to my already wounded heart. But I needed more than just messages. I needed to know the full extent of their relationship. Was it ongoing? How long had it been happening? I decided to step up my surveillance. I installed additional cameras in the house, focusing on areas where Amanda might feel safe to use her second phone. I also placed voice recorders in her car and handbag. If she was talking to Mark, I wanted to hear every word. Next, I turned my attention to the DNA results. The test confirmed that neither Max nor Lily was biologically mine. This revelation was devastating, but it also gave me the resolve I needed to move forward. I needed to find out who their father was. The messages on the cloned phone indicated that Mark was their father, but I needed concrete proof. I decided to hire a private investigator to gather more information on Mark and his relationship with Amanda. I met with the private investigator, a seasoned professional named Jason. He listened carefully as I explained my situation, taking detailed notes. "I need to know everything," I told him. "I want to know how long this has been going on, where they meet, and if there's anything else I should be aware of." Jason nodded. "I'll get to work right away. I'll start by following Mark and gathering information on his activities. I'll also look into his background to see if there's anything else you need to know." With Jason on the case, I felt a glimmer of hope. I returned home, trying to focus on work to distract myself from the turmoil inside. The hours passed slowly, each minute feeling like an eternity. I checked the surveillance footage regularly, looking for any new clues. A few days later, Jason called with an update. "I've been following Mark, and I've gathered some useful information," he said. He's definitely seeing Amanda, and they're very careful about where they meet. They usually meet at a hotel on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes. I've also got some photos of them together, which will be useful for your case. I thanked Jason and asked him to continue gathering evidence. The photos and additional details he provided were invaluable. I compiled everything into a file, ready for the confrontation that was sure to come. The next step was to gather evidence from Amanda's phone. The cloned phone had given me access to her messages, but I needed more. I needed to see her call logs, emails, and any other communications she might have had with Mark. I decided to confront Amanda's phone directly. One evening, after she had gone to bed, I retrieved the phone from the air duct and connected it to my laptop. Using specialized software, I downloaded all the data from her phone. As I sifted through the information, I found more incriminating evidence. There were emails between Amanda and Mark, discussing their plans and expressing their feelings for each other. There were also call logs showing frequent, lengthy conversations between them. As I pieced together the timeline of their affair, the extent of their betrayal became clear. They had been seeing each other for years, even before Max was born. The thought that my entire marriage had been built on lies was almost too much to bear. But I couldn't afford to dwell on the past. I needed to focus on the future and how to protect myself and my interests. With all the evidence compiled, I reached out to Lorraine, my lawyer. I explained everything I had found and asked for her advice on the next steps. Lorraine was efficient and understanding. "We have a strong case," she said. "With the DNA evidence, the surveillance footage, and the messages, we can prove infidelity and fraud. We can also sue for damages related to the vasectomy you had under false pretenses. This will give us significant leverage in the divorce proceedings." Lorraine also suggested filing for sole custody of the children, given that they were not biologically mine and Amanda had committed fraud. While the thought of losing Max and Lily was painful, I knew it was the right move. They needed to be with their biological father, and I needed to start rebuilding my life. The days leading up to the court hearing were tense. Amanda sensed something was wrong, but I kept my distance, avoiding any direct confrontation until I had everything in place. I focused on preparing for the hearing, working closely with Lorraine to ensure we had all the evidence and arguments ready. On the day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with a mix of dread and determination. Amanda was there, looking nervous and upset. As we sat in the courtroom, the judge reviewed the evidence. Lorraine presented our case with precision, detailing the infidelity, the fraudulent birth certificates, and the impact on my life. Amanda's lawyer tried to defend her actions, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me the divorce and awarding significant damages. Amanda was ordered to leave the house immediately and had limited visitation rights with the children, who were to be placed with their biological father. As I left the courthouse, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The truth was out, and justice had been served. But the road ahead was still uncertain. I had lost my marriage and my children, but I had also gained a chance to start anew. With the support of Lorraine, Michelle, and Jason, I knew I could rebuild my life and find happiness again. That evening, I returned to the house, now empty of Amanda's presence. The silence was both comforting and haunting. I walked through the rooms, memories flooding back with every step. But instead of dwelling on the past, I focused on the future. I called Michelle, thanking her for her support and asking if she could help me get through the next few days. Michelle arrived shortly after, her presence a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. We sat together, talking about the future and the steps I needed to take to move on. She reassured me that I wasn't alone and that together, we could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the night wore on, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The investigation had been painful, but it had also given me the clarity and strength I needed to move forward. With Michelle by my side and the support of my friends and colleagues, I knew I could overcome the past and build a new, better future. The morning of the confrontation arrived, and I felt a mixture of anxiety and resolve. I had all the evidence compiled neatly in a file, ready to present to Amanda. The house felt different, charged with an energy that hadn't been there before. I spent the early hours reviewing everything, making sure I hadn't missed any details. Today, there would be no turning back. Amanda had left for work as usual, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I called Michelle, who had been my rock through this ordeal. She arrived promptly, her presence calming my nerves. "Are you ready?" she asked, her eyes full of concern and determination. "Yes," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Let's do this." We drove to Amanda's office together, my mind racing with thoughts of how this would unfold. Michelle had arranged for a courier to deliver the divorce papers and the evidence package to Amanda right at her office. I wanted the impact to be as significant as possible, hitting her where it would hurt most, her reputation and her sense of security. As we arrived, I waited in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Michelle sat beside me, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to my internal chaos. At exactly 10 a.m., the courier entered the building. My phone buzzed with a notification, signaling that the package had been delivered. It was time. Amanda's call came almost immediately. I let it ring, not ready to face her voice yet. She called again, and again I ignored it. The third call, I picked up. "Gary, what is this?" Her voice was frantic, a mix of anger and fear. "We need to talk," I said coldly. "Come home. Now." There was a pause, then a shaky, "I'm on my way." We drove back to the house, Michelle beside me, silently supportive. The drive felt interminable, each minute dragging on as I rehearsed the confrontation in my mind. When we arrived, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what was to come. We didn't have to wait long before Amanda's car pulled into the driveway. She practically ran into the house, her face flushed with panic and confusion. "Gary, what the hell is going on?" she demanded as she burst into the living room, where Michelle and I were seated. "Sit down, Amanda," I said, my voice steady. She hesitated, looking from me to Michelle, then reluctantly sat on the edge of the couch. I took out the file and placed it on the coffee table between us. "Do you know what this is?" She glanced at it, her eyes widening in recognition. "Gary, please, I can explain." "No," I interrupted, my voice cold and firm. "No more lies. No more excuses. This is everything you've been hiding. The affair, the second phone, the real father of our children. It's all here." Amanda's face paled, and she looked down at her hands, trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "It just did." "Years, Amanda," I said, my anger boiling to the surface. "This didn't just happen. You've been lying to me for years. You made me believe those children were mine. You convinced me to get a vasectomy under false pretenses. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. "Gary, I love you," she said desperately. "It was a mistake. I was scared." "A mistake?" I snapped. "A mistake is something that happens once. This was a calculated betrayal. You had a relationship with Mark for years, Amanda. Years. You hid it, you lied, and you made a fool of me." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, you did," I said, my voice breaking. "You destroyed everything. Our marriage, our family, our life together. And now, you need to face the consequences." Michelle handed Amanda the divorce papers. "You've been served," she said quietly. "Pack your things and leave." Amanda stared at the papers, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. "Gary, please, can't we talk about this? Work something out?" "There's nothing to talk about," I said firmly. "You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. Take the children and go. I can't do this anymore." Amanda looked at me, her eyes pleading, but I stood my ground. She finally nodded, defeated, and went upstairs to pack. I listened to the sounds of her moving through the house, each step a painful reminder of the life we had built together and the betrayal that had torn it apart. Michelle stayed with me, her presence a comforting anchor. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly. "It's hard, but it's the right thing." "I know," I replied, my voice hollow. "It just hurts so much." "It will get better," she promised. "You'll get through this." Amanda came down with suitcases in hand, Max and Lily trailing behind her, confused and scared. My heart ached at the sight of them, but I knew this was necessary. "Goodbye, Gary," she said, her voice breaking. I couldn't bring myself to respond. I watched as they walked out the door, the life I had known disappearing with them. When the door closed, the silence that followed was deafening. Michelle put her hand on my shoulder. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get out of here for a while." We left the house and drove aimlessly, the weight of the confrontation settling heavily on my shoulders. Eventually, we parked at a quiet park, and I got out, needing to walk and clear my head. Michelle walked beside me, silent, giving me the space to process everything. After a while, I spoke. "I feel like I've lost everything." "You haven't," Michelle said firmly. "You've lost a lot, but you still have your life, your career, and your future. You have people who care about you and will support you through this." I nodded, appreciating her words even though the pain was still raw. "Thank you, Michelle, for everything. We're a team," she said with a small smile. "We'll get through this together." As the sun set, casting long shadows across the park, I felt a glimmer of hope. The confrontation was over, and while the road ahead would be challenging, I knew I wasn't alone. With Michelle by my side, I could start to rebuild my life, piece by piece. The weight of the confrontation lingered, but I felt a newfound resolve. The truth was out, and justice had been served. Now, it was time to move forward, to heal, and to rebuild. With Michelle's support and the strength I found within myself, I knew I could face whatever came next. The house felt like a tomb after Amanda left with the children. Each room echoed with memories, now tainted by the betrayal that had come to light. I walked through the silent halls, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The confrontation had been cathartic, but it had also left me raw and exposed. The life I had known was gone, replaced by an uncertain future. Yet, amid the turmoil, I felt a flicker of resolve. This was a chance to rebuild, to find a new path forward. Michelle had been my rock throughout this ordeal. Her support was unwavering, and I knew I wouldn't have made it through without her. As we drove away from the house, she suggested we stop by her place. "You need a change of scenery," she said. "Come stay with me for a few days. We can figure out the next steps together." I hesitated but then nodded. "Thank you, Michelle. I don't know what I'd do without you." Her home was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness I felt inside. She set me up in her guest room, making sure I had everything I needed. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. The anger, the sadness, the sense of betrayal, they all mingled together, making it hard to sleep. I knew it would take time to heal, but I was determined to move forward. The next morning, Michelle had already made coffee and breakfast. "Eat up," she said with a smile. "We have a lot to do today." I managed a weak smile in return. "You're right. Let's get started." Our first stop was Lorraine's office. The divorce proceedings were in motion, but there were still many details to iron out. Lorraine was efficient and reassuring, guiding me through the legal complexities. "We'll make sure you come out of this as unscathed as possible," she said. "You've been through enough." We discussed the custody arrangement for Max and Lily. While the children weren't biologically mine, I still cared deeply for them. Lorraine advised that we focus on ensuring their well-being, which meant they would stay with their biological father, Mark. It was a painful decision, but it was the right one. Next, we tackled the financial aspects. Amanda had been ordered to vacate the house, and I needed to decide what to do with it. Selling it seemed the best option, allowing me to pay off debts and start fresh. Lorraine helped me set the wheels in motion, and by the end of the day, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Small steps, but steps forward nonetheless. Back at Michelle's house, we settled into a routine. She was a constant presence, providing a sense of normalcy amid the chaos. We worked together during the day and spent the evenings talking, planning, and sometimes just sitting in comfortable silence. She never pushed, never pried, just offered quiet support when I needed it most. One evening, about a week after the confrontation, we sat on her porch, watching the sunset. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath. "Better, I think. It's still hard, but having you here makes a difference." She smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. "You're stronger than you think, Gary. You've been through hell, but you're coming out the other side." "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. "You've been my anchor." She reached out and took my hand. "We're a team, remember? We'll get through this together." Days turned into weeks, and slowly, I began to find my footing. The house sold quickly, and the financial strain eased. With Lorraine's help, I navigated the divorce proceedings, ensuring that my interests were protected. The settlement was fair, and while it didn't erase the pain, it provided a sense of closure. Michelle and I grew closer during this time. Her presence was a balm to my wounded heart, and I began to see her in a new light. She had always been professional and composed, but now I saw her warmth, her kindness, and her unwavering loyalty. One evening, as we shared a quiet dinner, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Gary, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I've been waiting for the right time." I looked at her, my heart suddenly pounding. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. "I've loved you for a long time. Watching you go through this has been hard, but it's also made me realize how much I care about you. I know this is a difficult time, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, in whatever way you need." Her words took my breath away. I had always respected and admired Michelle, but in the chaos of my crumbling marriage, I had never considered the depth of my feelings for her. Now, as I looked into her eyes, I saw the truth. I had been so focused on the pain and betrayal that I had overlooked the possibility of new beginnings. "Michelle, I struggled to find the words. I've been so lost, but you've been my guiding light. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I want you in it." She smiled, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Then let's take it one day at a time. We'll figure it out together." We spent the evening talking, sharing hopes and fears, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The future was still uncertain, but it was a future I no longer had to face alone. With Michelle by my side, I knew I could rebuild my life, stronger and better than before. The days continued to pass, each one a step further from the pain of the past and closer to a brighter future. Michelle and I took things slowly, allowing our relationship to grow naturally. We spent time together, exploring the city, trying new activities, and just enjoying each other's company. One day, as we walked through a park, hand in hand, I realized how far I had come. The betrayal and heartbreak were still there, but they no longer defined me. I had found strength in the support of those around me and had discovered a new depth of resilience within myself. "Michelle," I said, stopping to look at her, "thank you for being here. For everything." She smiled, her eyes full of love and warmth. "Always, Gary. We're in this together." As we continued our walk, I felt a sense of contentment that had been missing for a long time. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with Michelle by my side, I knew I could face whatever challenges came my way. The past had been painful, but it had also led me to this moment. I had lost much, but I had also gained something invaluable, a new beginning, a chance to rebuild my life with someone who truly cared about me. As we walked into the future, I felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, I was ready to face it head-on, with Michelle by my side. The end of one chapter was just the beginning of another. With love, support, and resilience, I knew that I could rebuild my life and find happiness once more.